Stop explaining yourself. Right now, today, stop. Every time you justify a decision to someone who didn't earn the right to question it, you hand them a piece of your power. Every time you over-explain why you left, why you said no, why you chose differently, you weaken yourself in front of people who were never going to understand anyway. This is not about being rude. This is not about shutting people out. This is about silence. Real silence. The kind of silence that protects your energy, guards your decisions, and makes you unshakable. For the next hour, you're going to learn the discipline that separates the powerful from the exhausted, the ones who explain everything and the ones who explain nothing at all. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Explanation Trap. Let's start here because this is where it all begins. You explain yourself too much. You know it. Somewhere inside you've always known it. And today that stops. Think about the last time you made a decision, a real decision, one that mattered, and instead of simply making it, you found yourself building a case for it, justifying it, rehearsing the reasons in your head before anyone even asked. That's the trap. That's the explanation trap. And most people are caught in it for their entire lives without ever realizing it's a trap at all. Here's the truth nobody tells you. Explaining yourself doesn't build trust. It builds doubt. Every time you over-explain a decision, you're not showing strength. You're signaling that the decision needs defending. You're signaling that you're not fully sure. And people can feel that. They sense the crack in your certainty, and once they sense it, they push. They question more. They probe deeper. Not because they suddenly care more about your life, but because you handed them an opening. That's the key. Every explanation is an opening. Every justification is a door you didn't need to leave unlocked. You have a choice here. You can keep handing out explanations like they're currency you owe to everyone who asks, or you can start understanding that most people who ask why were never entitled to the answer in the first place. Let me give you a picture of what this actually looks like in real life. Imagine someone, we'll call her the listener because this could be you, who makes the decision to leave a job. A good decision. A decision she thought through carefully, alone, over weeks. And then she goes to dinner with a relative and the question comes, why would you leave a stable job? And instead of saying, because it was right for me, she launches into 15 minutes. The salary. The hours. The burnout. The 5 other things she almost said but held back. She explains and explains and explains, and by the end of dinner she's exhausted. Not because the decision was wrong, but because she spent her energy defending something that never needed defending in the first place. Here's the part that stings. That relative forgets the conversation by the time dessert arrives. They move on. They don't lose a single night of sleep replaying it. But the listener? She replays it for weeks. She wonders if she said too much. If she should have said less. If she convinced them, as if convincing them was ever the point. This is the explanation trap. You pay in anxiety what they never even noticed costing them. And I want you to sit with that for a second because this is happening in your life too. Somewhere, right now, you are over-explaining a decision to someone who will forget the conversation before you do. You are spending real energy you need for your goals, your growth, your life, defending a choice that was never actually up for debate. It's not about being right. It's not about winning the argument. It's about discipline. The discipline to make a decision and let it stand on its own, without needing the world's approval to validate it. You don't need their permission. Read that again. You don't need their permission to leave the job, end the relationship, change the plan, say no, walk away, or choose differently than everyone expected. The moment you start believing you need permission is the moment you hand your power to people who were never going to use it responsibly anyway. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But what about the people who genuinely care? Don't they deserve an explanation? And we're going to get into that distinction later in this book. Because yes, there's a difference between people who love you and people who simply demand access. But for now, understand this. Even the people who care don't need a 15-minute defense. They need your presence. They need your trust. They don't need your justification. Here's your instruction for today, and I want you to actually do this, not just listen to it. The next time you make a decision, any decision, and you feel that familiar urge rising up, the urge to explain, to justify, to build the case, stop. Physically stop. Take a breath. And say less. Say far less than you want to say. Watch what happens. Watch how the world doesn't collapse. Watch how the people who matter don't disappear. And watch how the ones who do disappear were never worth the explanation to begin with. That's the key. That's always the key. You don't owe an explanation. You owe yourself a decision. Say it with me because we're going to come back to this line again and again throughout this book. You don't owe an explanation. You owe yourself a decision. Every time you feel the pull to justify yourself to someone who hasn't earned that access, remember this chapter. Remember the 15 minutes at dinner. Remember the energy paid for nothing. And choose differently. You've seen the trap now. You can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you can't keep falling into it the same way. But here's the thing, knowing the trap exists isn't enough. You have to understand why it feels so uncomfortable to stop falling into it. Why silence, real silence, feels almost unnatural at first. That discomfort isn't a warning sign. It's something else entirely. Chapter 2. Why silence feels uncomfortable, and why that's the point. You tried it, didn't you? Somewhere between the last chapter and this one, you had a moment. A small decision. A question from someone. And you felt the urge to explain rise up in your chest, and this time you caught it. You held back. You said less than you wanted to say. And it felt wrong. It felt awkward. Unfinished. Like you left something on the table that needed to be said. That feeling, that itch, that discomfort, that's what we're talking about in this chapter. Because if you don't understand why that discomfort exists, you will talk yourself right back into the explanation trap by tomorrow morning. Here's the truth. Silence feels unnatural to you because you were never taught to trust it. Think back. Way back. To childhood. To every time you did something and an adult asked, "Why did you do that?" And the acceptable answer was never silence. Silence got you in more trouble. Explaining got you out of it. So you learned early and deep that words were your defense. That justification was survival. That the faster and more thoroughly you explained yourself, the safer you were. That's the key thing to understand. This isn't a personality flaw. It's not that you're weak or needy or incapable of discipline. It's that you were conditioned, over years, maybe decades, to believe explanation equals safety and silence equals danger. And conditioning doesn't disappear just because you decide to change one afternoon. It has to be unlearned. Deliberately. Repeatedly. On purpose. So when you try to stay silent now, as an adult, making decisions no one is punishing you for, your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It still fires the old alarm. It still says, explain yourself or something bad will happen. Even when nothing bad is coming. Even when no one is actually waiting to punish you. The alarm goes off anyway because that's what conditioning does. It doesn't check if the threat is real. Just reacts. This is where most people quit. They feel that discomfort, they mistake it for a sign they're doing something wrong, and they go right back to over-explaining because it feels safer. Feels familiar. And familiar feels like safety, even when familiar is exactly what's been draining you your whole life. You have a choice here, and I need you to make it consciously because your instincts are going to fight you on this. You can listen to the discomfort and retreat back into old habits, or you can recognize the discomfort for what it actually is, evidence that you're breaking a pattern that no longer serves you. Let me say that differently because I want it to land. Growth does not feel comfortable. It was never supposed to feel comfortable. If staying silent felt easy and natural right away, it wouldn't be a discipline, it would already be who you are. The fact that it's hard is not proof that you're failing. It's proof that you're finally doing the thing that actually changes you. Think about anyone who has ever built real strength, physical, mental, emotional. The first time you hold a plank, your body shakes. The first time you set a hard boundary, your voice wavers. The first time you stay silent instead of explaining, your mind screams at you to fill the gap. That shaking, that wavering, that screaming, that's not your body telling you to stop. That's your body telling you it's under load. And load is exactly what builds strength. It's not about the discomfort being wrong. It's about discipline, the discipline to sit inside that discomfort without immediately reaching for the old habit that made it go away. Here's what I want you to do starting now. The next time you choose silence over explanation and that itch rises up, that urge to fill the space, to say more, to justify, I want you to name it internally. Just say to yourself, this is the old conditioning talking. Not the truth. That's it. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to argue with it. You just need to recognize it for what it is, an old alarm going off in a building that isn't actually on fire. Discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is discipline. Say that with me because we're going to need it again. Discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is discipline. Every master of self-control you've ever admired has sat inside that same uncomfortable silence you're feeling right now. The difference between them and everyone else isn't that they didn't feel the pull to explain. It's that they felt it and stayed quiet anyway. Again. And again. Until the discomfort got smaller. Until the silence started to feel less like danger and more like power. That's what's waiting for you on the other side of this chapter. Not immediately. Not tomorrow. But if you keep choosing silence over explanation even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable, the alarm gets quieter every time. The old conditioning loses its grip. And one day, silence won't feel like something you're forcing. It'll feel like who you are. But there's something else feeding that old habit, something deeper than childhood conditioning. It's the need for validation. The quiet, constant hunger to know that others approve of what you've chosen. And until we deal with that hunger directly, you'll keep reaching for explanations even when you know better. Chapter 3: The Silent Cost of Seeking Validation. There's a question I want you to ask yourself honestly right now before we go any further. When was the last time you made a decision, a real one, without checking it against someone else's opinion first? Take your time. Really think about it. Because for most people, the honest answer is unsettling. It's been a while. Maybe longer than a while. Maybe you can't remember the last time you trusted your own judgment enough to act without first testing it against someone else's approval. That's what this chapter is about. Not explanation this time, something underneath it. The hunger for validation. And I want to be direct with you. This hunger is quietly costing you more than almost anything else in your life. Here's how it works, and I want you to watch closely because it's subtle. Validation seeking doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like weakness in the moment. It feels like being careful. It feels like being thoughtful. It feels responsible. I just want a second opinion. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. I just want to check with a few people before I commit. That sounds reasonable. That's what makes it so dangerous. Because here's what's actually happening underneath those reasonable-sounding words. Every single choice you make starts getting filtered through a question that has nothing to do with what's right for you. The question becomes, will they approve? Not, is this true for me? Not, does this align with what I actually want? Just, will they approve? Will they nod? Will they tell me I made the right call? And once that filter is running in the background of your mind, something starts to erode. Slowly. Quietly. Your ability to trust yourself. That's the key. That's the real cost. It's not that asking for input is inherently bad. It's that constant validation seeking teaches your own mind that your judgment isn't enough on its own. And the more you teach yourself that lesson, the more true it becomes. Not because your judgment was actually weak, but because you never gave it the chance to stand on its own. Let me paint the picture for you because I know some of you are living this right now. Someone faces a simple decision. Something as small as which job offer to take, or as personal as whether to end a relationship. And instead of sitting with it, instead of listening to what they already know deep down, they go out and ask. They ask a parent. They ask a best friend. They ask a coworker. They ask someone on the internet who doesn't even know them. 5 different people. 5 different opinions. 5 different directions pulling at them. And by the end of it, they're not clearer. They're more confused than before they asked anyone at all. This is the trap hiding inside the trap. You think you're gathering wisdom. What you're actually doing is drowning your own voice under a pile of other people's voices, none of whom have to live with the outcome of the decision. Only you do. Only you ever will. It's not about the input being useless. It's about discipline, the discipline to know your own mind well enough that you don't need 5 people to confirm what you already sense is true. You have a choice here, and it's an uncomfortable one. You can keep outsourcing your certainty to other people, hoping enough outside approval will finally make you feel sure, or you can start rebuilding the muscle you've let atrophy for years. The muscle of deciding, alone, and trusting that decision without needing a chorus of agreement behind it. Every time you ask for permission, you lose a piece of your own authority. Say that with me because it's the core of this entire chapter. Every time you ask for permission, you lose a piece of your own authority. I'm not telling you to isolate yourself. I'm not telling you to ignore wise counsel from people who've earned the right to speak into your life. That's not what this is. This is about the compulsive habit, the reflex, of needing outside approval before you can feel settled in your own choices. That reflex is what's killing your confidence, one small validation-seeking moment at a time. Here's your instruction, and I want you to actually apply this the next time a decision comes up. Before you ask anyone else what they think, ask yourself first. Sit with it. Alone. No phone. No group chat. No calling 5 people. Just you and the decision, and enough silence to hear what you actually think before anyone else's voice enters the room. You might be surprised how often you already know the answer. You just haven't given yourself permission to trust it. You don't need their permission. You never did. The only signature that decision ever needed was your own. This is where real confidence starts to rebuild, not from being told you're right by everyone around you, but from making a decision, standing behind it without a chorus of approval, and discovering that you survived. That the world didn't end. That you were capable the entire time. You've spent this chapter learning to stop asking for permission you never needed. Now it's time to look at the people who don't just wait to be asked, the ones who perform for an audience before they even think to ask. Because there's a whole different kind of trap waiting for those who need to be seen making the right move, not just approved of for making it. Chapter 4, Powerful People Don't Perform. I want you to picture two people making the exact same decision. Both of them decide to change careers. Both of them make the leap at the same time for similar reasons. But watch what happens next, because this is where they split into two completely different paths. The first person announces it, posts about it, tells everyone in their circle in detail why they're doing it, how brave it is, how it's part of their journey. They narrate every step. Every setback becomes a story. Every small win becomes a milestone shared for applause. They need people watching. They need people responding. Without an audience, the decision almost doesn't feel real to them. The second person just leaves. Quietly. They don't announce it. They don't build a narrative around it. They simply make the change, put their head down, and let the results speak for themselves months later. Here's the question I want you to sit with. Which one of these people do you actually respect more? You already know the answer. And that's what this chapter is about. There are two archetypes I want to introduce to you, because once you see them, you'll start noticing them everywhere. In your workplace, your friendships, your family, and if you're honest, sometimes in yourself. The first is the performer. The second is the operator. And the difference between them is the difference between looking powerful and actually being powerful. The performer needs an audience for their decisions to feel valid. Every choice becomes content. Every struggle becomes a story arc. They're not necessarily lying about their journey, but the need to narrate it, to make sure everyone sees it, that's the tell. That's the crack. Because underneath the performance is usually an unspoken question. Do you see how hard I'm working? Do you see how much I'm growing? Please tell me it's working. That's the key thing to understand. Performing your decisions for other people is not confidence. It's insecurity wearing confidence's clothes. The operator is different. The operator makes the decision, moves, adjusts when needed, and says almost nothing about it until the results are undeniable. Not because they're secretive or cold, but because they don't need anyone's commentary to know they're on the right path. Their certainty comes from inside, not from an audience's reaction. You have a choice here. You can keep narrating your life for people who are mostly scrolling past it anyway, or you can start operating. Quietly. Consistently. Letting your results do the talking your mouth doesn't need to do. Let me be blunt with you, because this chapter demands it. Every time you feel the urge to announce a decision before you've even lived it out, ask yourself what you're actually looking for. Are you sharing because it's useful to someone else? Or are you sharing because you need the validation of being seen making a hard choice? There's nothing wrong with sharing your life. But there's a massive difference between sharing from a place of confidence and performing from a place of need. It's not about hiding your life from everyone. It's about discipline, the discipline to let your actions build your credibility instead of your announcements. Think about the people you actually admire most in your life. Not the loudest ones. Not the ones who post the most, talk the most, explain the most. The ones who quietly built something real. A business, a body, a family, a reputation, while saying very little about the process until it was already done. Those people didn't need your applause along the way. And that's exactly why, when the results finally showed, the applause meant something. Let your results talk. Keep your mouth closed. Say that with me, because it's going to matter more than you think in the months ahead. Let your results talk, keep your mouth closed. Here's the hard part, and I'm not going to soften it. Choosing to operate instead of perform means you will not get the immediate hits of validation you're used to. No one will comment on your quiet decision. No one will tell you how proud they are of a change they don't even know is happening. That silence, in the beginning, can feel like nothing is happening at all. But something is happening. It's happening in the only place that actually matters, in your consistency, in your follow-through, in the version of you that's being built when no one's watching and no one's clapping. That version is more real, more durable, and more powerful than anything built for an audience. Here's your instruction for this chapter. The next time you make a real decision, something that matters, resist the urge to announce it before it's proven itself. Don't post it. Don't explain it to the group chat. Don't build the narrative in advance. Just do the work. Let months pass. Let the results speak when they're ready, not when you're impatient for approval. You don't need their permission, and you don't need their audience either. Your power was never meant to be performed. It was meant to be built, quietly, consistently, in rooms no one else is standing in. Now, some of the people watching you perform or waiting for your explanation, they aren't just innocent bystanders. Some of them are actively demanding answers you never owed them in the first place. And it's time to talk about exactly who those people are, and why most of them don't deserve the access they're asking for. Chapter 5. The people who demand explanations rarely deserve them. Not everyone who asks why deserves an answer. I want you to read that again slowly because for most of your life you've probably operated under the opposite belief, that a question deserves a response simply because it was asked. Someone raises their eyebrow, someone says, "Why would you do that?" And your instinct kicks in immediately: explain, justify, defend. As if the question itself, regardless of who's asking or why, automatically earns your reasoning. It doesn't. And this chapter is going to teach you how to tell the difference. Here's the truth nobody says out loud. Some people ask, why, because they genuinely care about you and want to understand your world better. And some people ask, why, because they need control. They need to insert themselves into decisions that were never theirs to weigh in on. They need to feel like they still have a hand on the wheel of your life, even after you've already decided to drive it yourself. These two groups sound identical in the moment. Both say the same word. Both raise the same question. But their motives are worlds apart, and if you can't learn to tell them apart, you'll keep handing your reasoning to people who don't deserve it, while wondering why you feel drained every time you do. That's the key. The word why is not automatically a request for connection. Sometimes it's a request for control, dressed up as concern. Let me give you a way to spot the difference because this matters more than almost anything else in this book. Watch what happens after you answer. If the person receives your answer, sits with it, and respects it, even if they don't fully agree, that's someone operating from care. They wanted to understand you, not manage you. But if the person takes your answer and uses it as ammunition, picking it apart, questioning it further, circling back to it days later to reopen the debate, that's someone operating from control. They were never actually looking for understanding. They were looking for an opening to keep influencing a decision that already belongs to you. This is where you have to get honest about the people in your life. Not cruel. Not dismissive. Honest. Think about the people who love you the most, the ones who've earned real trust over years. Notice something about them. They rarely demand justification. When you tell them you've made a decision, they usually just ask how they can support you. They trust that you thought it through because they trust you as a person. Their love isn't conditional on understanding every detail of your reasoning. Now think about the people who question everything. Who need every choice explained in full, who push back even after you've answered, who seem more invested in debating the decision than in supporting the person who made it. Notice the pattern. It's rarely about you. It's about them. Their need to feel informed, included, or in control is bigger than their respect for your autonomy. You have a choice here. You can keep treating every why as equally valid, equally deserving of your energy and your reasoning, or you can start drawing a line based on who has actually earned access to your inner world and who hasn't. It's not about shutting people out. It's about discipline, the discipline to recognize that access to your reasoning is not a universal right. It's a privilege, and privileges are earned through trust, not demanded through persistence. Here's something I want you to really absorb. The loudest demands for explanation often come from the people least entitled to receive one. Think about it. The people who genuinely respect you tend to ask less, because respect naturally includes trust. The people who respect you least tend to ask the most, because their need for control fills the space where trust should be. So the next time someone pushes hard for an explanation, really pushes, refuses to let it go, circles back again and again, I want you to pause and ask yourself one question. Is this person seeking understanding or are they seeking control? The answer will almost always tell you exactly how much of your reasoning they actually deserve. Access is earned. Explanations are not a tax you owe everyone. Say that with me because it's going to protect you for the rest of your life. Access is earned. Explanations are not a tax you owe everyone. I know this is uncomfortable to hear, especially if some of the people demanding explanations from you are family, or people you've known for years. This isn't permission to cut people off or treat everyone with suspicion. It's permission to finally stop feeling obligated to defend yourself to people whose questions were never really about you in the first place. Here's your instruction for this chapter. Think of one relationship in your life right now where you consistently over-explain yourself, where you find yourself justifying decisions again and again to someone who never seems satisfied no matter how much you explain. I want you to notice that pattern the next time it happens. And instead of diving into another long explanation, try something shorter. Try something simpler. Watch how they respond. Their reaction will tell you everything you need to know about whether they were ever entitled to more. You don't need their permission. And more than that, you don't need their approval of your reasoning, especially when that reasoning was never up for debate in the first place. Now that you know how to tell the difference between people who deserve access and people who simply demand it, it's time to learn how to actually protect that access, How to set a limit and let it stand without turning every boundary into another exhausting negotiation. Chapter 6. Boundaries without apology. Say this sentence out loud in your head: I'm not able to do that. Now notice what happens next. Notice the urge, the almost automatic reflex, to keep talking. To add because. To soften it with an apology. To explain the circumstances so the other person doesn't feel rejected, doesn't feel confused, doesn't feel anything uncomfortable at all. That reflex is what this chapter is going to dismantle. Here's the truth about boundaries that almost no one tells you. The moment a boundary requires a defense, it stops being a boundary. It becomes a negotiation. And negotiations, by definition, can be lost. Think about that for a second because it changes everything. A real boundary is not up for debate. It's not a proposal waiting for the other person's approval. It's a statement of fact about what you will and won't accept, do, or tolerate. The second you attach a long explanation to it, you've quietly reframed it. From, this is how it is, to please agree with why this is how it is. And once you're asking for agreement, you've handed the other person veto power over something that was never theirs to vote on. That's the key. A boundary defended is a boundary weakened. Let me show you what this looks like in real life because I want you to recognize it immediately the next time it happens to you. Someone asks you to take on extra work outside your responsibilities. You say, I'm not able to do that. Plain, simple, complete. Now watch the discomfort rise. Watch the silence that follows feel heavier than it should. Watch the urge build inside you to fill that silence. I'm just really swamped right now and I have this other project and I promise I'll help next time and I feel bad but. Stop. Every word after, I'm not able to do that, was unnecessary. Every word after that sentence was you negotiating away your own boundary before anyone even pushed back. Here's what's fascinating and I want you to really absorb this. Most of the time the other person wasn't even going to argue. You defended a boundary that no one attacked. You apologized for a limit no one questioned. The pressure you felt didn't come from them, it came from your own discomfort with silence, the same discomfort we talked about back in chapter 2. You have a choice here. You can keep cushioning every boundary with explanations, apologies, and reassurances that make the other person comfortable at your expense, or you can start stating your limits once, clearly, and letting them stand on their own without needing to defend them into existence. It's not about being harsh. It's about discipline. The discipline to trust that a clearly stated limit doesn't need 3 paragraphs of justification behind it to be valid. I want to be honest with you about what happens the first few times you try this. It will feel uncomfortable. It will feel almost rude even when it isn't. You'll want to fill the silence that follows your boundary with more words, more softness, more reassurance. Resist that urge. Let the silence sit there. Let it be a little awkward. That awkwardness is not a sign you did something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things are always uncomfortable before they become natural. Here's what happens over time, and this is the part most people never stick around long enough to see. The discomfort fades. Not because the other person suddenly becomes okay with your boundary, but because you stop needing their comfort to validate your own limit. And something else happens too. The people around you slowly stop testing that boundary because they learn it's not up for negotiation. Boundaries that get defended, explained, and re-explained invite more pushback over time, not less. Boundaries that are stated once and held firmly, calmly, without apology, those are the ones people eventually stop testing altogether. A boundary defended is a boundary weakened. Say that with me again because you're going to need to remember it the next time someone pushes. A boundary defended is a boundary weakened. I want to give you something practical here because knowing this and doing this are 2 different things. The next time you need to set a limit, with a coworker, a family member, a friend, anyone, I want you to practice saying it in 1 sentence. Just one. No because. No, I'm sorry but. No follow-up reassurance tacked on at the end. State it and then stop talking. Let the silence that follows be uncomfortable. Let it be theirs to sit in, not yours to fix. This isn't about becoming cold or unreachable. You can still be warm. You can still be kind. Kindness and brevity are not opposites. You can say, I'm not able to do that, with a warm tone and a steady presence and still say nothing more. The warmth is in your delivery. The strength is in your restraint. You don't need their permission to hold a limit. And you don't need their comfort with that limit either in order for it to be valid. Here's your instruction for this chapter. Identify 1 boundary in your life right now that you've been over-explaining, apologizing for, or renegotiating every time someone pushes back. The next time it comes up, state it once. Clearly. Without the extra sentences trailing behind it. Notice the discomfort. Sit inside it. And notice, over time, how much lighter you feel when you stop carrying the weight of defending limits that were never yours to defend in the first place. You've learned to set the boundary. But there's a belief sitting underneath all of this that we haven't fully confronted yet. The belief that you owe everyone equal access to your life, your reasoning, your explanations, simply because they're standing in front of you asking. That belief is a myth. And it's time to take it apart completely. Chapter 7. The Myth of Owing Everyone Access. There's a belief sitting quietly underneath almost everything we've covered so far in this book. It's the root system beneath the explanation trap, the validation seeking, the performing, the over-defended boundaries. And until we pull this belief out by the root, all the other lessons will only go so deep. The belief is this: I owe everyone access to my reasoning. Not access to your time. Not access to your help. Access to your why. The inner workings of your decisions. The private reasoning that led you to choose what you chose. Most people walk through life believing that anyone who asks, a coworker, a distant relative, an acquaintance from years ago, a stranger with an opinion, is entitled to see inside that process. Simply because they asked. I want to tell you clearly, that belief is false. And more than that, it was never actually true to begin with. It was taught to you. Think about where this belief came from. Almost always, it traces back to childhood. As a kid, being explainable was tied directly to being safe. If a parent or authority figure asked why you did something, giving a full, satisfying explanation often determined whether you got in trouble or got left alone. Transparency was survival. Explanation was protection. You learned, deep in your nervous system, that access to your reasoning was something you owed to anyone with power over you. Here's the problem: you carried that belief into adulthood where it no longer applies the same way. As an adult, most of the people asking you to explain yourself don't actually have power over you. They don't determine your safety. They don't control your outcomes. But your nervous system doesn't know that. It still reacts to a simple, "Why did you do that?" the same way it reacted at 7 years old, with the instinct to explain fully, immediately, and completely. That's the key. The belief that you owe everyone access to your reasoning isn't a universal truth. It's a leftover survival strategy that no longer fits the life you're living now. Let me give you an image I want you to carry with you for the rest of this book. Picture a long table. At that table there are seats, but not unlimited seats. Only a handful. These are the seats reserved for the people who get to sit in on your reasoning. The people who understand your full context. The people who've earned the right to ask why, and receive a complete, honest answer. Most people in your life do not have a seat at that table. And that's not cruelty. That's not coldness. That's just reality. You cannot give full access to your reasoning to everyone who asks. A coworker who barely knows you, a distant cousin who resurfaces once a year, someone from your past who lost the right to your inner world a long time ago. Giving them a seat doesn't make you generous. It makes you exhausted because you're spending seats on people who were never invested enough to deserve one. Not everyone gets a seat at the table of your reasoning. Say that with me because I want this image burned into your mind. Not everyone gets a seat at the table of your reasoning. You have a choice here. You can keep pulling out chairs for anyone who knocks, exhausting yourself trying to make everyone understand every decision you make, or you can start guarding that table the way you'd guard anything valuable, reserving it only for the people who've actually proven they deserve to sit there. It's not about isolating yourself from the world. It's about discipline. The discipline to recognize that intimacy, understanding, and reasoning are not things you're required to hand out equally to everyone who exists in your life. Here's what I want you to notice because it's going to reframe how you see every interaction going forward. When someone who doesn't have a seat at your table demands one anyway, pushing for a full explanation, refusing to accept a simple answer, that pushiness isn't a sign you owe them more. It's a sign the boundary is working exactly as it should. Their frustration is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that they're used to having more access than they've actually earned. I want to be careful here because this isn't permission to become closed off, secretive, or distant from everyone. The people who do have a seat at your table, the ones who've shown up for you, protected your trust, earned real closeness, they still deserve honesty, openness, and real access to your reasoning. This chapter isn't about shrinking your world. It's about being intentional with who gets to see inside it. Here's your instruction for this chapter. I want you to actually picture that table. Picture the seats. And I want you to mentally walk through the people in your life who've been demanding access, asking why, pushing for explanations, expecting transparency, and ask yourself honestly, have they earned a seat? Some of them have. Give them the honesty they've earned. But some of them haven't. And it's time to stop pulling out chairs for people who never should have been standing at that table in the first place. You don't need their permission to guard your reasoning. It was always yours to guard. You just forgot that somewhere along the way. Now that you understand you don't owe everyone access, there's something even more powerful waiting on the other side of this discipline. Something that doesn't happen overnight, but compounds slowly, quietly, every single time you choose restraint over explanation. It's the way silence, practiced consistently, begins to reshape how the entire world treats you. Chapter 8: How Silence Builds Respect Over Time. Nothing you've learned in this book so far will feel powerful the first time you use it. I need to tell you that plainly because I don't want you expecting an instant transformation. The first time you withhold an explanation, the world doesn't suddenly bow to your new discipline. The first time you set a boundary without apology, nobody applauds. The first time you choose silence over justification, it might even feel like nothing happened at all. That's because respect doesn't work like a light switch. It works like weight training. One rep doesn't build the muscle. It's the 100th rep, the 1000th rep, done consistently over time, that changes the shape of something. This chapter is about that compounding effect. How silence, practiced again and again, slowly reshapes the way the entire world treats you. Here's what happens in the beginning, and I want you to be prepared for it. When you first start withholding explanations, setting firmer boundaries, and refusing to perform your decisions for an audience, some people will push back. They're used to a version of you that over-explains, that seeks approval, that hands over access freely. When that version of you changes, even for the better, it disrupts the pattern they've grown comfortable with. Expect friction. Expect a few uncomfortable conversations. Expect some people to test whether this new you is really going to hold. That's the key thing to understand. The friction you feel in the beginning is not proof that the discipline isn't working. It's proof that it's working exactly as it should, because real change always disrupts the old pattern before it establishes a new one. Now here's what happens next if you stay consistent. Something shifts. Not immediately. Not in a single conversation. But over weeks, over months, the people around you start to recalibrate. They stop expecting the long explanations. They stop pushing as hard for justifications because on some level they've learned, through repetition, not through a single announcement, that your decisions don't require a debate to stand. This is where real respect begins to form. Not respect built on your ability to convince people you're right, but respect built on the simple, consistent fact that you don't need to convince anyone at all. Let me give you a picture of this in action. Think of someone in a leadership position. A manager, a parent, anyone who has to enforce a rule or a standard. In the beginning, when they set an expectation, people question it. They ask why. They push back, hoping the rule will bend under enough pressure. If that leader responds every single time with another long explanation, another justification, another attempt to win people over with reasoning, the questioning never stops. It actually increases, because every explanation given is treated as an invitation to negotiate further. But watch what happens when that same leader responds differently. They state the expectation once, clearly, calmly. And when it's tested, they don't relitigate it, they simply hold it. Consistently. Without needing to win anyone over with more words. In the beginning, this might actually increase resistance as people test whether the boundary is real. But over time, and this is the part that matters most, the resistance fades. Not because people suddenly agree with every decision, but because they learn the decision isn't up for discussion. And there's something people respect, almost against their will, about a person who doesn't need to be argued into holding their own ground. Consistency without explanation earns more respect than any argument ever will. Say that with me because it's the engine behind everything in this chapter. Consistency without explanation earns more respect than any argument ever will. You have a choice here. You can keep re-explaining yourself every single time someone questions you, hoping that enough words will finally earn their respect. Or you can start trusting that consistency, held silently and repeatedly over time, will do what explanation never could. It's not about winning people over. It's about discipline. The discipline to hold your position long enough, quietly enough, for respect to build on its own, without needing to argue anyone into giving it to you. I want to be honest about the timeline here because this is where most people give up too early. This isn't a one-week transformation. It's not even a one-month transformation in most cases. It's a slow compounding effect, built rep by rep, boundary by boundary, silent decision by silent decision. Some relationships will shift in weeks. Others will take months. Some people, frankly, may never fully adjust, and that's information too about how much of a seat they actually deserved at your table in the first place, going back to what we covered in the last chapter. Here's your instruction for this chapter. I want you to pick one relationship or one environment in your life, work, family, friendship, doesn't matter which, and commit to this discipline consistently for the next 30 days. Not perfectly. Consistently. Every time the urge to over-explain rises up, choose restraint instead. Every time a boundary gets tested, hold it without re-justifying it. Don't expect immediate results. Expect a slow shift, and trust the process even when it feels like nothing is changing on day 3 or day 10 or even day 20. You don't need their permission to be respected. You need consistency. That's the only permission that was ever required, and it's permission you give yourself, one silent decision at a time. Now, I want to pause here and address something important, because there's a version of this lesson that can be twisted into something dangerous. Silence can build respect, but silence can also become a hiding place, a way to avoid accountability disguised as discipline. Before you go any further with this practice, you need to understand exactly where that line is. Chapter 9, When Silence Becomes Strength, Not Avoidance. I need to slow down here because this chapter matters more than almost any other one in this book, and if you skip it, everything you've learned so far can quietly turn into something dangerous. Here's the danger. Everything we've covered, withholding explanations, guarding access, holding boundaries without apology, can be twisted. It can become an excuse. A shield used not to protect your peace but to dodge responsibility. And if that happens, this discipline stops being strength. It becomes avoidance wearing strength's clothing. I want to draw a hard line for you right now because I refuse to let this book become a manual for people who want permission to disappear from accountability. There are two kinds of silence. The first kind protects a decision that was already made with integrity. The second kind hides a decision that was never examined honestly in the first place. They can look identical from the outside. Someone stays quiet. Someone doesn't explain. But underneath they are opposites. One is discipline and the other is cowardice dressed up as discipline. That's the key distinction of this entire chapter. Silence used to protect truth is strength. Silence used to escape truth is avoidance. And you have to know every single time which one you're actually practicing. Let me make this real. Imagine someone who made a mistake, genuinely hurt another person, broke a real commitment, caused real damage. And instead of owning it, instead of having the hard conversation, instead of taking accountability, they retreat into silence. They tell themselves, I don't owe anyone an explanation. They use the language of this book to justify walking away from something they actually need to face. That is not the discipline this book is teaching. That is avoidance, borrowing the vocabulary of strength to excuse itself. Compare that to someone who made a difficult, correct decision, ended a relationship that needed to end, set a boundary that needed to be set, walked away from something that was no longer serving them, and chooses not to justify that decision to people who are simply uncomfortable with it. That silence is different. That silence isn't hiding from truth. It's protecting a truth that's already been faced, already been reckoned with, already been decided. Here's how you tell the difference in your own life, and I want you to actually use this every single time you're about to choose silence over explanation. Ask yourself one question honestly before you decide to stay quiet. Am I avoiding truth or am I protecting my peace? Sit with that question. Don't rush past it. If the honest answer is that you're avoiding something you know you need to face, a mistake, a hard conversation, a responsibility you owe someone, then silence is the wrong move. That's not the discipline of this book. That's the exact behavior this discipline was never meant to protect. But if the honest answer is that you've already faced the truth, already made the decision with integrity, and you're simply choosing not to defend it to people who don't need to be involved, then silence is exactly right. That's the strength we've been building this entire book. You have a choice here, and it requires more self-honesty than almost anything else in this book. You can use silence as a tool of integrity, applied only after you've done the harder internal work of facing the truth, or you can let silence quietly become a place to hide from things you already know you need to address. It's not about avoiding hard conversations. It's about discipline, the discipline to have the hard conversations you actually owe people, while refusing to have the unnecessary ones you don't. I want to be specific here because vague principles don't hold up under real pressure. If you hurt someone, own it. Silence is not the tool for that moment. If you made a mistake that affects someone else, address it directly. Silence is not the tool for that moment either. If you owe someone an apology, give it fully without hiding behind the language of boundaries. This discipline was never built to protect you from consequences you've actually earned. It was built to protect you from unnecessary justification for decisions that were already sound. Silence is a shield, not a hiding place. Say that with me because it's the line that keeps this entire book honest. Silence is a shield, not a hiding place. A shield protects something valuable that's already there, Your peace, your integrity, decisions you've already made with a clear conscience. A hiding place conceals something you don't want anyone, including yourself, to look at directly. One is strength. The other is fear, wearing strength's language to avoid feeling like fear. Here's your instruction for this chapter, and I want you to be brutally honest when you do it. Think of a situation right now where you're using silence, where you've stopped explaining yourself, stopped engaging, gone quiet. Ask the question directly, am I protecting a decision I've already faced honestly? Or am I avoiding something I actually need to deal with? If it's the second one, this chapter is your permission to stop hiding, have the hard conversation, and face what you've been avoiding. If it's the first one, this chapter is your permission to let the silence stand without a shred of guilt. You don't need their permission to protect your peace. But you do need your own honesty to know when peace is actually what you're protecting. You've now learned the discipline in full, how to withhold explanation, how to hold boundaries, how to guard access, how to build respect through consistency, and how to make sure silence never becomes an excuse to avoid what you actually owe. Everything up to this point has been preparation. What's left now is to see what your life actually becomes when you live this way permanently from this day forward. Chapter 10, The Life You Build When You Stop Explaining. I want you to close your eyes for this next part, or if you're driving, walking, working, just let your mind go quiet for a moment, because I want you to actually picture this, not just hear it. Picture your life 6 months from today. A full 6 months of practicing everything in this book. 6 months of catching yourself before you over-explain. 6 months of asking yourself first before asking 5 other people. 6 months of letting your results speak instead of narrating every step. 6 months of stating boundaries once and letting them stand. 6 months of guarding your table, letting only the people who've earned it sit close to your reasoning. What does that version of you look like? I'll tell you what I see, because I've watched this transformation happen again and again. That version of you moves differently through the world. Not louder. Not more aggressive. Quieter, actually. But underneath that quiet is a kind of settledness that wasn't there before. A steadiness that doesn't need constant checking, constant approval, constant defense. That's the whole point of everything we've covered. This was never about becoming cold or distant or unreachable. It was about removing the exhausting habit of spending your energy on people and situations that never deserved it, so that energy could go somewhere that actually matters. Into your work. Into your growth. Into the relationships that earned their seat at your table. Into your own peace. Think back to where you started this book. Think about that 15-minute dinner conversation from chapter 1, the one that got replayed for weeks over a decision that never needed defending in the first place. Now picture that same kind of moment happening in your life today, after everything you've learned. Someone asks you why. And instead of the old spiral, the justification, the second-guessing, the anxious replay afterward, you simply say what's true briefly and let it stand. And then you move on with your night. No replay. No anxiety. No energy lost to a conversation that was never going to change anything anyway. That's the key thing to understand about everything in this book. This was never really about the words you say or don't say to other people. It was about what happens inside you when you stop needing their approval to feel settled in your own decisions. The explanation was never really for them. It was always a symptom of something inside you that didn't yet trust itself. And that's what you've been building this entire time, not just the discipline of silence, but the self-trust that makes silence possible in the first place. You have a choice here, and it's the same choice you've had this entire book, just clearer now than when we started. You can go back to the old pattern, explaining, justifying, seeking approval, performing your decisions for an audience that was never going to give you the peace you were looking for anyway. Or you can keep walking the path this book laid out. Quietly. Consistently. One silent decision at a time. It's not about becoming someone who owes the world nothing. It's about discipline. The discipline to finally understand that the only person whose approval your decisions ever truly needed was you. I want you to think about the specific decision in your life right now. The job, the relationship, the choice you've been over-explaining to people who were never entitled to the full story. Picture yourself making that exact same decision, but this time in total silence. Total confidence. No defense. No performance. No chasing approval from anyone standing outside of it. Just you, your judgment, and the quiet certainty that you don't need anyone's permission to trust yourself. That's the life this discipline builds. Less anxiety because you're no longer spending energy defending decisions that were sound from the start. Less second-guessing because your certainty comes from inside you now, not from a chorus of outside opinions. And a decision-making process finally rooted in something solid, your own judgment, earned back one silent choice at a time. You don't owe the world your reasons. You owe yourself your peace. Say that with me one final time because I want it to be the last thing echoing in your mind when this book ends. You don't owe the world your reasons. You owe yourself your peace. Everything you've learned across these 10 chapters, the explanation trap, the discomfort of silence, the cost of validation, the difference between performing and operating, the people who don't deserve access, the boundaries you hold without apology, the myth of owing everyone entry to your reasoning, the respect that silence builds over time, and the line between strength and avoidance, all of it points to one single truth. Your life gets lighter, stronger, and more fully yours the moment you stop explaining it to people who were never going to carry it with you anyway. You've done the work of understanding it. Now it's time to close this book the way you're going to live the rest of your life, without a single unnecessary word. Stop explaining yourself. You've heard it for the last hour and now it's time to live it. Every decision you've been justifying, stop. Every choice you've been defending, stop. Every reason you've been rehearsing in your head for people who were never entitled to it, let it go right now. You don't owe anyone your reasoning. You don't owe anyone your process. You don't owe anyone access to the parts of your mind that you built, alone, through decisions only you had the courage to make. Silence isn't cold. Silence isn't rude. Silence is power, the power to move, to choose, to grow without waiting for anyone's approval. So here's your challenge starting today. The next time you feel the urge to explain a decision you already know is right, don't. Say nothing. Let your results speak. Let your peace speak. Let your silence speak louder than any explanation ever could. Stop explaining yourself. Start becoming unshakable. This is your discipline now. Go live it.